Betrayal is a bitter pill, especially when it comes from the one person you trusted with your life. In this riveting tale, we meet Maria Carter, a vibrant young woman whose world crumbles the day her millionaire husband, Victor Carter, turns his back on her. With a newborn life stirring inside her, she's cast away, hurt and penniless, left to survive on her wits and unwavering determination. Yet fate often spins its own surprises. Years later, Maria returns, not just with twin children, but also with something far more shocking: legal papers that challenge everything Victor built. This is a story of secrets, resilience, and a mother's unstoppable resolve. Victor Carter was the epitome of wealth and status. Born into the prestigious Carter family of New York, he never knew a day of hardship. By his early 20s, he'd launched his own real estate development company, Carter and Company, which soon grew into a multi-million-dollar empire. His name peppered society columns, often linked to glamorous events at the Waldorf Astoria or charity galas at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He wore power like a tailored suit, always crisp, always commanding attention. Yet beneath the glitter of his success lay a man whose heart was as restless as his ambitions. When Victor met Maria Ramirez, who later took his last name, many thought it an odd pairing. She was from a middle-class background, with a quiet warmth that belied her keen intelligence. Maria had no illusions about Victor's world. She'd been raised to value hard work, honesty, and family. She'd studied psychology at Columbia University on a scholarship, determined to forge her own path despite financial constraints. It was this grounded nature that first drew Victor to her. He was tired of the superficial circles he frequented, bored by women who saw him as a mere stepping stone to wealth. Maria, however, made it clear she neither needed nor wanted a free ride. She found Victor intriguing yet guarded, driven yet haunted by some unseen spectre of dissatisfaction. Their courtship happened fast. One evening, they found themselves in a heated debate about philanthropy at a charity dinner for underprivileged youth. Maria questioned whether the money truly reached the intended children or if it was swallowed up by bureaucracy. Victor, used to writing sizable checks to prestigious causes, was intrigued by her cynicism. Instead of dismissing her argument, he invited her to his penthouse overlooking Central Park to hear her proposals. She offered cost-effective ideas for direct aid, from small scholarships for promising students to grassroots programs focusing on tutoring and mentorship. Something about Maria's directness made Victor see the world from a different lens. Their hours-long chat ended with a champagne toast on his rooftop, where they shared their first kiss under the shimmering city lights. After only a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony in the Hamptons. The wedding was orchestrated by Samantha Jones, the go-to wedding planner for Manhattan's elite, and attended by notable figures like Robert Greene, a public relations mogul, and James Carlton, heir to an automobile fortune. Photos of the bride and groom graced society magazines for weeks. Maria wore a smile that seemed both radiant and nervous, as if she was stepping onto a precarious bridge into Victor's vast world. But the cracks began to form soon after they said their vows. Victor's business expansions demanded near constant travel, often leaving Maria alone in their spacious penthouse. She tried to fill the void with volunteering and further education, but she couldn't shake the sense that her husband's promise of always being there was steadily fading. The more success Carter and Company amassed, the less time Victor had for the domestic life he claimed to value. Tensions reached new heights when Maria discovered she was pregnant. Initially, Victor was thrilled. He envisioned a son who would someday inherit the Carter legacy. But as Maria's pregnancy advanced, his enthusiasm waned. The physical realities, doctor's appointments, and her emotional ups and downs were inconveniences he hadn't bargained for. She felt him pulling away, but each time she asked, he deflected. He claimed that business deals in Tokyo or board meetings in London were critical to their future security. She, in turn, felt like an afterthought. Still, Maria believed in the power of communication. She tried to talk, to share her fears of losing him to his ambitions. But their conversations became more arguments than dialogues. One night, after returning from a grueling 2-week trip to Dubai, Victor lashed out in frustration when Maria questioned his distant behavior. In a cold, measured tone, he let slip a horrifying truth. "I never asked for this family thing right now. It's not a convenient time." That sentence rattled her. Their marriage was less than 2 years old, and here he was, speaking of their unborn child as if it were a corporate inconvenience. Though he apologized later, Maria sensed a deeper wedge. Days later, an explosive argument ended with Victor practically shutting the door in her face, literally sending her away to a friend's apartment while he sorted out his priorities. He never called. He never visited. He merely had one of his assistants deliver a typed note, instructing Maria to take whatever time she needed, along with a cursory check that felt like a payoff. This humiliating betrayal cut to the core. Devastated, Maria returned to her mother's modest home in Queens. She cradled her unborn child, tears streaming, wondering how a man she'd loved so deeply could be so callous. The glitz and glamour of the Carter name had dissolved into heartbreak, and unbeknownst to Victor, the unborn child he referred to so dismissively was not one, but two twins. When Maria discovered she was expecting twins, she was already living in a cramped guest room at her mother's small apartment in Corona, Queens. If the pregnancy had been stressful before, the realization she was carrying twins magnified that stress tenfold. Yet, in a strange twist, it also emboldened her. She vowed that these children would never feel unwanted or unloved, even if their father had effectively abandoned them. Maria's mother, Anita Ramirez, was a tough woman who had immigrated from the Dominican Republic decades earlier. She'd worked as a nurse's aide, struggling through long shifts to provide a life for Maria. Anita's paternal instincts flared at the sight of her pregnant daughter. She was furious at Victor, calling him a sinvergüenza who had no honor. But she also recognized her daughter's heartbreak and tried to balance her anger with support. Financially, Maria was in a precarious situation. The check Victor's assistant had delivered was substantial by most standards, enough for a down payment on a decent home. But accepting it felt like selling her pride. Maria debated what to do. Should she deposit the money for the sake of her unborn children, or tear it up to stand on principle? Eventually, she settled on a compromise. She opened a separate account for the twins, depositing only half of the amount. She'd use it for their needs if absolutely necessary. The rest of her daily living expenses would come from her own hustle. To that end, Maria found part-time work at a community center near her mother's home, offering counseling sessions. Drawing on her psychology background, she helped immigrant families cope with stress, guiding them through cultural and financial challenges. Despite her own turmoil, she found solace in assisting others. It reminded her of the days she'd spent discussing direct philanthropy with Victor, back when he seemed to care about making a genuine difference in the world. That memory now felt like a cruel joke. Time marched forward, and soon Maria was in her 7th month. The pregnancy was tough. Carrying twins took a toll on her body. She was often exhausted, and the cramped living space only added to her emotional strain. Sometimes, late at night, she would scroll through social media, catching glimpses of Victor's extravagant life. One day it was a photograph of him at a black tie fundraiser. Another day, a business summit in Zurich. There was no mention of his pregnant wife, no inquiry about her well-being. All she had were cold, businesslike text messages from one of his assistants, occasionally asking about medical updates. She never replied. Then came the night Maria went into premature labor. A heavy rainstorm pounded against the windows of her mother's apartment, turning the roads into rivers. Panicked, Anita called for an ambulance when Maria's contractions started coming at frightening intervals. The paramedics rushed her to Elmhurst Hospital. The twins, one boy and one girl, arrived 6 weeks early, tiny and fragile, but alive. Maria named them Matteo and Luna, after her mother's cultural heritage and her own desire to infuse them with hope and light. Those days in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, were tense. The twins each weighed under 5 pounds, their tiny bodies hooked up to tubes and monitors. Maria and Anita prayed by their sides, day and night. Not once did Victor appear. Not a single call, text, or visitor's pass was used by anyone from the Carter side. It was as though mother and children had ceased to exist in Victor's world. When the twins finally grew strong enough to be discharged, Maria faced the reality of raising them on her own. Their medical bills had mounted, even after insurance, leaving her anxious about how she would manage. Yet an opportunity arose in an unexpected place, the community center. The director recognized Maria's skill and dedication and offered her a full-time position coordinating mental health outreach programs. It didn't pay 6 figures, but it came with a modest salary and health insurance enough to give her children a stable start. For months, Maria juggled single motherhood with a demanding job. She'd wake up before dawn to feed and change Matteo and Luna, drop them off at a small daycare run by a trusted neighbor, then hustle to the community center. Late in the evening, she'd cradle them in her arms as she read children's stories, determined that no matter her circumstances, the twins would feel the warmth of a mother's love. Every so often, a pang of anger or sadness would stab her heart. She'd think of Victor's broken promises, his dismissal of her pregnancy, and his utter absence. Now that the children were here, she wrestled with the idea of taking legal action, but part of her hesitated. She feared a drawn-out court battle that might bring out the worst in everyone. Still, the injustice gnawed at her. She wanted to shield Matteo and Luna from the pain of having an indifferent father, but she also wondered if they had a right to the Carter name and the privileges that came with it. While rummaging through old files one night, Maria stumbled upon her marriage certificate and some pre-marital paperwork. The documents reminded her that not everything was as one-sided as Victor would have liked. Early in their marriage, during her volunteer stints, Maria had shared valuable insights into philanthropic strategies that Carter and Company soon adopted. She had emails and signed notes acknowledging her contributions as an unofficial consultant. In some communications, Victor had even promised a small percentage stake in the philanthropic branch of Carter and Company if her strategies proved successful. It was a faint glimmer of hope, a sign that she had legal grounds to claim some form of ownership. Indeed, the philanthropic branch, Carter's Hope, as it was branded, had become a significant part of Victor's public image. It garnered positive press and attracted deals that expanded his business portfolio. She realized that her behind-the-scenes input had contributed to the empire Victor now enjoyed. Suddenly, the idea of fighting back didn't seem so futile. Spurred on by this discovery, Maria decided it was time to consult a lawyer. If Victor Carter thought he could discard her and the twins without consequence, he was gravely mistaken. Maria reached out to an old college acquaintance, Jonathan Pierce, who worked at a modest law firm in Brooklyn. Though not a high-profile attorney, Jonathan had a reputation for diligence and empathy traits Maria deeply valued. She confided in him about the entire saga, the wedding, the betrayal, the twins, and her legal documents that suggested a fractional stake in Carter and Company's philanthropic ventures. Jonathan was both concerned and intrigued. He saw that Maria's evidence, her consulting notes, email exchanges, and signed acknowledgements provided enough ground to claim partial ownership. If not ownership of Carter's entire empire, it at least established a legitimate share in Carter's Hope, a division that had grown into a multi-million-dollar philanthropic machine. But any lawsuit against Victor Carter was destined to be an uphill battle. He had top-tier legal teams on retainer, experts who excelled at burying opponents in endless paperwork. Maria needed more than just a legal claim. She needed a strategy. In the weeks that followed, Maria and Jonathan pieced together a plan. They combed through every scrap of documentation, building a case that Maria had contributed significantly to the philanthropic branch and was promised a stake, effectively making her a silent partner. Jonathan explained that such cases often hinge on how the promise was articulated, whether verbally or in writing, and if there's evidence of the promised benefit impacting business decisions. Luckily, Maria had saved every email and even had a few voice recordings from their brainstorming sessions. In one particularly damning snippet, Victor's voice could be heard saying, "If we're ever successful with Carter's Hope, you'll be the reason, Maria. I'm committing to that in every way." That was gold in legal terms. It established intent, linking her contributions to an ownership stake. Jonathan's face lit up when he heard it. It was precisely the leverage they needed. But Maria had reservations. What if a legal confrontation caused Victor to retaliate by seeking custody of the twins out of spite? She'd heard horror stories of wealthy exes who dragged children through emotional and legal turmoil. Jonathan promised to handle custody issues carefully. In the meantime, he urged her to keep the twins' existence as private as possible until their claim was strong enough that even Victor's powerful lawyers would advise him to settle. As they built their case, Maria continued her life as normally as she could, working at the community center and raising Mateo and Luna. She cherished the simple joys of motherhood, the giggles during bath time, the first coos of Ma, the way the twins' big dark eyes followed her every move. Each moment with them reminded her of why she was fighting this battle, and she vowed to see it through. Yet the pressure mounted, money was tight, and legal fees grew by the week. Though Jonathan gave her a discounted rate, the cost of depositions and expert opinions was steep. Maria stayed awake at night, perched on the edge of her bed, staring at the sleeping twins. She questioned if she was doing the right thing. Was it worth subjecting herself to the stress and possibility of a very public battle? Her mother, Anita, was unwavering in her stance. "Don't let that man get away with it," she'd say, scowling at the mere mention of Victor's name. "You and those babies deserve everything he owes you." Anita's convictions lit a flame in Maria, rekindling her desire for justice. Around this time, a close friend from college, Charlotte Baker, reached out, inviting Maria to a networking event. Charlotte was now a budding journalist at a reputable news site, and she wanted to introduce Maria to some of her colleagues. The gathering took place in a small, upscale lounge in Manhattan. Though out of her comfort zone, Maria attended, hoping to meet people who might help her philanthropic ideas gain traction, or at least shed light on how to handle public relations if her legal case against Victor ever became a media sensation. Midway through the event, Charlotte pulled her aside. "I have someone you need to meet," she whispered, leading Maria to a quiet corner. Standing there was a man who introduced himself as Edward Lawson, a well-known philanthropic advisor whose clients included high-profile celebrities and moguls. Intrigued by Maria's passion for direct impact charity models, Edward listened intently to her experiences and the community center's approach. Over the course of the evening, he offered subtle hints that he might be able to support her efforts. While this didn't immediately solve her legal quandary, Maria sensed she might be onto something bigger. The philanthropic strategies she once discussed with Victor were still hers to utilize. If she partnered with the right organizations or individuals, she could replicate the success of Carter's Hope on her own terms. And that, in turn, could strengthen her argument that she was indeed a co-creator of the philanthropic model that Victor now paraded as his own achievement. Before leaving, Edward handed her his business card. "Give me a call," he said. "I can't promise anything yet, but I see passion in your eyes." That's rare in this business. His smile felt genuine, a refreshing contrast to Victor's hollow grin. For the first time in a long while, Maria left a Manhattan event feeling hopeful rather than disillusioned. News of Maria's potential philanthropic project reached Victor's ears through the grapevine. A mutual acquaintance tipped him off that Maria was mingling with influencers in the philanthropic sector. Though the acquaintance knew nothing of the twins or the brewing legal battle, they casually mentioned that Maria seemed determined to make a significant social impact. Victor was stunned. He'd assumed Maria had quietly slipped into obscurity, perhaps returning to her mother's home in Queens, never to resurface in his orbit. After all, that was the arrangement he'd practically forced upon her when he ended their relationship. Disturbed by the rumor that she might be forging new alliances, Victor asked his assistant, Andrew, to discreetly gather information. Andrew, ever the loyal right-hand man, made a few calls, checked social media posts, and quickly reported back that Maria was indeed active in the philanthropic world, though details remained sparse. A mix of emotions churned inside Victor: annoyance, curiosity, and an odd sense of guilt he tried to suppress. His pride refused to let him acknowledge it, but deep down he remembered all the late-night conversations he'd once had with Maria. How she'd passionately championed direct outreach, personal connections, and small-scale scholarships. Had she taken those ideas and found supporters who believed in them? And if so, did that threaten his carefully curated image as a philanthropic tycoon? Meanwhile, life at Carter and Company was as hectic as ever. Victor's latest venture involved constructing a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, an ambitious project to stand as a new symbol of his success. The building was to feature a luxury hotel, high-end apartments, and an entire floor dedicated to Carter's Hope offices, showcasing how a businessman could blend capitalism with charity. By day, Victor was in meetings with architects and investors. By night, he attended society gatherings, flaunting his success to the likes of Robert Greene and James Carlton, who remained part of his social circle. He rarely spared a thought for the woman who once bore his name until now. Unable to quell his curiosity, Victor decided to contact Maria. One late afternoon, as Maria was nursing Luna while Matteo napped in a crib near her desk at the community center, her phone buzzed. The caller ID read Victor Carter. Her heart pounded. She hadn't heard from him directly in over a year. Why now? Her first instinct was to ignore the call, but something told her to pick up. She needed to see how far he would go to pretend that she and the twins didn't exist. "Hello?" she answered, voice steady but cautious. "Maria." "It's been a while," Victor began, his tone smooth but distant. "I heard you've been busy in philanthropic circles. I wanted to, see how you're doing." She nearly laughed at the absurdity. Here was a man who hadn't bothered to ask about her well-being throughout her pregnancy or after childbirth, and now he feigned concern. Refusing to mince words, she replied, "Cut to the chase, Victor. We both know you're not calling to check on me." He hesitated for a moment, letting out a sigh. "I hear you've been pitching philanthropic strategies, maybe similar to some things we used to discuss. You know, at Carter's Hope, we're always open to collaboration. Maybe we could align our efforts." Maria felt anger surge, but she remained calm. Why on earth would I want to align efforts with someone who discarded me the moment? Things got inconvenient. "I'm surprised you even remember those discussions," since you never gave me official credit. Victor swallowed. That's not entirely fair. We parted ways because... She cut him off. We parted ways because you threw me out, remember? A tense silence followed. Maria could practically feel him struggling to maintain composure. Look, she continued, I have my own path now. I won't be needing your so-called collaboration. Victor cleared his throat, forcing a polite tone. You might find it beneficial. After all, Carter and Company can offer resources, financial backing, influence. We can do great things together. The audacity left her speechless for a moment. Had he forgotten that she was his wife and that he'd never even acknowledged their children? Suddenly, her fury broke. Don't you dare talk to me about resources, she snapped. If you genuinely want to help, let's talk about the twins. A stunned pause on Victor's end. What twins? Maria froze. She hadn't planned to reveal it like this, but something inside her had snapped. Yes, twins. Your children, Victor. I have a son and a daughter, Matteo and Luna. They're almost a year old now. Congratulations. You're a father. She could hear Victor's breathing quicken. That this must be some kind of ploy, he said almost in a whisper. You never told me. She let out a hollow laugh. You never cared to ask. And with that, she ended the call. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her felt triumphant, as though she'd landed a direct blow on a man who thought he was untouchable. Another part of her felt raw and terrified. She'd just let the cat out of the bag, and Victor now knew about Matteo and Luna, who knew how he would respond. Sure enough, within an hour, Jonathan Pierce's phone lit up with calls from Carter and Company's legal department. They demanded paternity tests and threatened countersuits if Maria tried to press charges or claim child support. Jonathan calmly replied that they should expect formal papers soon and that Maria was fully prepared to prove everything in court. What Victor didn't realize was that Maria had meticulously prepared for this moment. She had medical records, DNA test results taken at birth, and numerous witnesses to her pregnancy and the twins' arrival. She also had a strong legal team guided by Jonathan. She was done being meek and fearful. Now she was in the driver's seat. Within hours of Maria abruptly ending her phone call with Victor, the gears of an impending legal battle began to grind. The moment she revealed that the unborn child he had once dismissed as an inconvenience was actually two children, a boy and a girl, Victor's world shifted. He had built his life on certainty and control, from corporate boardrooms to manicured charity galas. Now, uncertainty loomed on all fronts. Beyond the personal shock, he also feared for his carefully crafted public image as a benevolent magnate. If news leaked that he had abandoned a pregnant wife carrying twins, his reputation and his investors' confidence could come crashing down. On Maria's end, the revelation was bittersweet. She had meant to keep the twins' existence private until her legal groundwork was unassailable. But part of her was relieved. The secret was out, and she no longer needed to pretend that Victor Carter was merely a chapter in her past. The father of her children now had no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. She braced herself for the tempest to come. Almost immediately, Carter and Company's legal team, led by a man named Sebastian Myers, demanded a paternity test, sending formal letters to Maria's attorney, Jonathan Pierce. Though framed politely, the letters carried an air of threat. They implied that if the tests proved negative, Carter and Company would pursue legal action for defamation and emotional distress. But Maria knew the truth. She had unequivocal proof that Victor was the father, including medical records, hospital statements, and earlier DNA tests performed while the twins were still in the NICU. The evidence was incontrovertible. Within a week, Maria and Victor found themselves in preliminary court proceedings at the Manhattan Family Court. Nervous energy buzzed in the corridors. While the hearing was not swarmed by media yet, word had begun to leak to a few tabloids. Photographers, picking up on rumors of a scandal involving a wealthy real estate mogul, hovered near the courthouse doors, eager to snap any telling photograph. Maria arrived with Jonathan, feeling her heart pound as she walked the marble floors. She spotted Victor at the far end of the corridor, flanked by three impeccably dressed attorneys. He refused to meet her gaze, though she could sense the tension simmering in him. The judge presiding over their initial hearing was stern and businesslike. After hearing the basics, the court set schedules for formal DNA testing, financial disclosures, and initial custody considerations. While the hearing itself was brief, its implications loomed large. It was now a matter of public record that Victor Carter faced a claim of paternity, and that he contested none of the steps required to confirm it. In the days that followed, the press frenzy grew, fueled partly by anonymous leaks. Glitzy tabloids ran headlines such as "Millionaire Mogul's Secret Twins" and "Carter's Hidden Heirs." On social media, discussions split along ideological lines. Some painted Maria as an opportunist, looking to exploit Victor's wealth for a lucrative settlement. Others sympathized with her, appalled by the idea of a pregnant woman cast aside by a powerful husband. Maria, advised by Jonathan and a small PR team, limited her public remarks. She knew it was better to let legal facts speak for themselves. Yet, the saga took a surprising turn when Richard Farnsworth, an older real estate titan who had heavily invested in Carter and Company, caught wind of Victor's personal predicament. Farnsworth, a man known for his old-fashioned principles, had once admired Victor's charisma and bold business ventures. However, he despised scandal. Discovering that Victor might have abandoned his pregnant wife, Farnsworth felt morally repulsed, so much so that he issued a statement freezing his investments in Carter's newest skyscraper project until the matter was ethically resolved. "Family is essential," he told a financial newspaper. "I cannot, in good conscience, continue to pour money into a venture when the CEO is embroiled in such a moral debacle." This development sent tremors through Carter and Company's boardroom. Stocks dipped amid investor unease, and murmurs of dissatisfaction spread within the ranks of the company. By publicly rebuking Victor, Farnsworth emboldened other business partners to question not only Victor's ethics, but also his reliability. A manager at a major bank who had once pursued a joint venture with Carter and Company was quoted saying, "If he can't handle family matters responsibly, how can we trust him with a multi-billion-dollar project?" While Victor scrambled to contain the fallout, Maria fought her own battle on a different front. She was still balancing her day job at the community center with the exhausting task of raising 2 toddlers alone. The emotional toll of the legal proceedings weighed heavily on her. She knew the fight had only just begun. Depositions, financial investigations, and custody hearings lay ahead. At moments, she questioned whether her pursuit of justice was worth the strain. But every time she saw Matteo and Luna's bright eyes when she came home, she found renewed conviction. They deserved acknowledgement, security, and a future untainted by their father's abandonment. Meanwhile, Jonathan Pierce and his legal team meticulously built Maria's case. They gathered email threads and signed documents from Maria's early days with Carter and Company, strengthening their parallel claim that she had contributed significantly to the philanthropic division, Carter's Hope. The plan was not only to secure child support and custody arrangements, but also to validate Maria's partial ownership in the philanthropic arm. If successful, she would hold more than just a moral victory. She would have a tangible share in the empire that Victor once shut her out of. By the time the DNA results confirmed Victor's paternity, no surprise to Maria or Jonathan, the stage was set for a fierce legal showdown. The next court date loomed, and talk of mediation swirled among the attorneys. Under mounting public scrutiny and investor pressure, Victor's team hinted that a settlement might be possible. For Maria, that would mean a chance to avoid a drawn-out court battle, as long as the settlement truly reflected justice for herself and the twins. As the final days of autumn approached New York, the swirl of lawsuits, media coverage, and corporate turmoil converged into one relentless storm. Neither side could fully predict the outcome, but one thing was clear: the lives of Maria, Victor, and the twins would never be the same. The shockwaves rippled far beyond family drama, striking at the heart of Victor's empire and exposing the fragile foundation upon which his outward success was built. In the eye of the storm stood Maria, resolved to protect her children's future and ready, at last, to face Victor head-on. A low hum of anxiety filled the Manhattan law office, where the first official mediation session between Maria and Victor was scheduled. The conference room, located on the 28th floor of a sleek skyscraper near Bryant Park, had been deliberately designed to project calm, warm lighting, tasteful abstract art, and a large glass window that offered a panoramic view of the city. Still, the atmosphere felt charged with tension and uncertainty, as if the participants were bracing for a clash of wills they had long postponed. Maria arrived early with her lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, and a junior associate who carried several thick folders of evidence. She wore a fitted blazer and kept her hair neatly pinned back, projecting confidence despite her pounding heart. The stakes had never been higher. Not only was she fighting for child support and the future of her twins, but also for recognition of her stake in Carter's Hope, a philanthropic venture she had essentially co-founded, yet received no credit for in official company documents. Across town, Victor Carter stepped out of a black luxury sedan, adjusting his cufflinks with a nervous flick of the wrist. He was flanked by two of his own high-powered attorneys and his personal assistant. Victor's face betrayed the weariness he felt. For months, he had been juggling corporate fires sparked by investor unrest and media gossip about his secret children. Now, with DNA tests confirming that he was indeed the father of Maria's twins, he had run out of ways to dodge the confrontation. A part of him hated that the matter had escalated to this point. Another part resented Maria for upending his meticulously curated life. When the two parties finally settled into their seats, neither Maria nor Victor spoke immediately. The mediator, a composed, middle-aged woman named Deborah Klein, opened the session by clarifying its purpose: to find a mutually acceptable resolution to the questions of child support, custody, and any claims surrounding Carter's Hope. Deborah's tone was patient yet firm, making it clear that this was a structured environment. Emotional outbursts would not be dismissed, but they would have to be channeled productively. Jonathan led the opening statements on Maria's side. He painted a picture of a young mother abandoned during pregnancy, forced to rely on her mother's modest home in Queens. He outlined how Maria not only shouldered the emotional toll of raising two children alone, but also contributed significant intellectual property to Carter's Hope. As he spoke, Victor kept his eyes trained on the polished table, occasionally flicking his gaze to Maria. When Jonathan finished, Victor's lead counsel, Sebastian Myers, countered that while Victor regretted the breakdown of the marriage, the timeline and financial obligations still needed to be clarified. He added that no formal contract had ever officially recognized Maria's partnership in Carter's Hope. The mediator then invited Maria to speak. Her voice trembled initially, but she soon found her footing. She spoke of how she had believed in Victor's vision, how they had spent hours brainstorming philanthropic strategies aimed at direct community intervention, and how she had eagerly helped organize small pilot programs ideas that later became pillars of Carter's Hope. My contributions may not be on any formal contract, she concluded, but they were real, and they made a tangible difference. Victor finally lifted his gaze. The lines of fatigue on his forehead deepened. "I won't deny you contributed," he said quietly, choosing his words with care. "But you can't expect that conversation alone gives you a corporate stake." His tone was guarded, though not dismissive. Maria recognized a flicker of guilt in his eyes, as if he knew his statement rang hollow after their years of partnership, both personal and professional. For the next few hours, the mediator guided them through the labyrinth of financial records, philanthropic projects, and personal responsibilities. Despite the earlier tension, the mediation process forced a structure onto their conflict that made actual compromise possible. Lawyers on both sides scribbled notes, calculating potential child support figures, trust fund options, and investment valuations for Carter's hope. Maria insisted on securing a fair share for the twins, plus acknowledgement of her role in the philanthropic branch. Victor, aware that going to court could damage him further, especially under scrutiny from major investors like Richard Farnsworth, expressed willingness to negotiate a respectable settlement. The conversation took a more personal turn when custody arose. Maria's eyes clouded with hurt as she recalled the months of pregnancy she endured alone, the nights when Matteo and Luna were in the NICU without any support from their father. Victor, uncomfortable, nodded but said nothing. Then, in a moment of uncharacteristic vulnerability, he admitted, "I was scared. My business was growing so fast, and I felt like I couldn't handle it all. That's no excuse. I just ran." A charged silence enveloped the room. For a brief second, Maria saw not the arrogant mogul who threw her out, but a fearful man who lacked the emotional tools to face unexpected fatherhood. It didn't erase the pain he had caused, nor did it suddenly justify his actions, but it added a dimension to him she had rarely acknowledged. She cleared her throat and replied, "You can still make things right, Victor, but it can't just be about money. You have to show up." Slowly, an outline of a settlement emerged, a substantial trust fund for Matteo and Luna, ongoing child support, and a clear custody schedule that allowed Victor a genuine role in their upbringing. More delicate was the matter of Carter's hope. In a move that drew surprised looks from his own counsel, Victor indicated he was open to granting Maria an official percentage in the philanthropic division. "It's only fair," he said at last, casting a sidelong glance at Maria. "I've always said Carter's hope wouldn't have taken off if not for your early insights." The mediator ended the day's session by commending both parties for progress made, though final details still needed to be negotiated. Walking out of the conference room, Maria felt a mix of exhaustion, relief, and lingering anger. The memory of Victor slamming a door in her face while she was pregnant still haunted her. But the fact that he was now admitting her role and recognizing the twins felt like a milestone, an acknowledgement she had once believed might never come. The next steps would involve hammering out the precise language for custody rights and ownership stakes, a process that might take multiple sessions. But for the first time since their falling out, Maria saw a faint glimmer of a future where the twins would be embraced by both parents, and where she herself would no longer be relegated to the shadows of Victor's empire. Though trust would not be easily rebuilt, a bridge, however shaky, had been planted, and its foundation rested on the simple yet profound notion of accountability. In the weeks following the mediation, the media quickly picked up on rumors of a settlement. Contrary to typical sensationalist reporting, the story began to shift focus to Maria's philanthropic vision. Journalists who followed the case discovered her dedication at the community center, her background in psychology, and her unwavering commitment to grassroots charity. Even the tabloids that once labeled her a gold digger started to offer more balanced takes, highlighting her sacrifice and resilience. Carter's Hope, now restructured with Maria on the board, launched a new initiative, the Twin Stars program, named in a subtle nod to Matteo and Luna. It aimed to fund and mentor teenage parents, providing them with educational resources, job training, and support networks. Maria worked tirelessly, ensuring the program was more than a flashy press release. She partnered with local non-profits, personally visited struggling teenage mothers, and arranged career workshops. The results were tangible, improved academic performance, better emotional support, and a pathway to independence for young parents. The press ate it up, hailing the program as a beacon of modern philanthropy. Victor, wary of negative publicity, threw his weight behind the initiative. Together, he and Maria made a handful of public appearances, sometimes awkward, but mostly professional, to promote the cause. At one event, a gala aimed at raising funds for the Twin Stars program, they addressed a crowd of influential donors. Maria spoke first, outlining the program's goals. She received a standing ovation. Then came Victor's turn. He stood at the podium, took a breath, and surprised everyone by sharing an emotional anecdote about meeting his children for the first time. "You know, for the longest time, I thought my worth hinged on professional success," he said, his voice trembling. "But I was wrong. The moment I laid eyes on Matteo and Luna, I realized that all the skyscrapers in the world couldn't fill the void of a family I nearly lost." Some in the audience teared up, others clapped. Maria couldn't gauge if his speech was entirely genuine or partly performative. Maybe it was both. Regardless, the gala raked in hefty donations, ensuring a strong start for the Twin Stars program. Emboldened by this success, Maria began planning expansions into other cities. She traveled to Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles, forging alliances with local charities. Along the way, she brought Matteo and Luna, now toddling around, to show donors exactly who inspired her work. Still, her interactions with Victor were cautious. They communicated mostly through formal emails or scheduled visits for the twins. On rare occasions, they shared brief personal moments. Once, during a coffee break at the Carter's Hope headquarters, Victor awkwardly asked about the twins' latest milestones, words, steps, favorite songs. Maria offered him a few stories, softened by the fact that, at least now, he was trying. But she kept her guard up. Trust wasn't something she could easily hand back. A year passed, and the scandal that once rocked the tabloids faded into distant memory. Public sentiment shifted, viewing Victor as a businessman who'd stumbled but redeemed himself through fatherhood and philanthropic reforms. Maria's reputation soared. She became a sought-after speaker on the topics of ethical philanthropy and women's empowerment. Her steady presence in Carter's Hope not only gave her a platform, but also kept the organization true to its grassroots foundation. The twins were thriving. Matteo and Luna, now 2 years old, toddled around daycare centers, babbling words, scribbling crayons on blank sheets of paper. Maria decorated the walls of her modest but cozy apartment with their artwork. She could have moved somewhere far more upscale, given her newfound financial security, but she chose to remain close to the community center. It was home in ways the penthouse with Victor had never been. Then came a bolt from the blue. Richard Farnsworth, the investor who'd pulled out of Victor's skyscraper project, invited Maria to a private luncheon. He was impressed not only by the Twin Stars program, but also by Maria's core beliefs, helping people help themselves, fostering education and nurturing personal growth rather than just throwing money at problems. He proposed that she spearhead a new philanthropic trust he was setting up, independent of Carter's Hope. It would be a massive undertaking, with projects across education, healthcare, and community building. The catch? It would require Maria to relocate to Los Angeles for at least a year to establish the West Coast operations. The offer was a dream come true, but it raised complex questions. Should she uproot the twins? How would that affect Victor's visitation rights? Would taking the job jeopardize her seat on the Carter's Hope Board? Above all, did she want to subject Mateo and Luna to cross-country custody arrangements? Maria mulled it over, discussing the matter with Anita, Jonathan, and even Charlotte Baker, the journalist friend who'd become a close confidant. They all encouraged her to take the opportunity, stressing that she could always arrange flights for the twins to spend time with Victor. Besides, Farnsworth promised lavish funding for the philanthropic trust, meaning Maria could replicate and even expand the success of Twin Stars on a larger scale. It was a chance to create a legacy of her own, free from Victor's shadow. Finally, she scheduled a meeting with Victor. They met in his penthouse office, a place she hadn't set foot in since before she was pregnant. The memories made her uneasy, but she stood firm. She laid out Farnsworth's proposal, her plans, and her concerns about the children's well-being. To her surprise, Victor supported her. "I won't lie, I'll miss them," he admitted, his eyes drifting to a small framed photo of the twins on his desk. "But I realize this is important for you and for them. I want them to see their mother succeed." He paused, then added, "We can figure out custody schedules, long weekends, holidays, whatever it takes." Maria felt a lump in her throat. This was a side of Victor she'd rarely seen, selfless, almost humble. Though she'd never forget his betrayal, she appreciated the gesture. She left the penthouse that day with a renewed sense of hope, not just in her career path, but in the possibility that Victor might genuinely be changing. Months later, Maria found herself standing on the balcony of a sleek Los Angeles condo, gazing at a fiery sunset over the Pacific Ocean. Mateo and Luna, now nearly 3, played with colorful blocks in the living room behind her. She was still adjusting to the laid-back West Coast vibe, a far cry from the hectic rhythm of New York. Yet the move felt right. She'd officially launched the Farnsworth Ramirez Foundation, forging partnerships with local nonprofits and even state universities. Her vision for direct impact philanthropy resonated with donors who were tired of impersonal, bureaucratic charities. Media outlets praised her as a rising figure in the philanthropic world, often citing her as a role model for women who refuse to be defined by their circumstances. Despite the distance, Victor remained present in the twins' lives. Monthly visits alternated between La and New York. They video-called every Sunday evening, allowing the kids to show off new artwork or sing nursery songs. Maria watched these interactions with cautious optimism, acknowledging that, while fatherhood came late for Victor, he was making an effort to be there in a way she once never believed he would. Back at Carter's Hope, Maria retained her board seat. She flew in quarterly for meetings and used remote conference calls to stay involved. The philanthropic division was flourishing, thanks to Maria's reforms and the heightened public profile that followed the scandal. Ironically, the very dispute that nearly destroyed Victor's public image ended up raising Carter's Hope's standing in the charity world. During one of those board meetings, Maria learned that Carter's Hope was exploring a massive expansion into affordable housing, an intersection of real estate and community service. Maria's heart fluttered at the synergy of her old philanthropic ideas and her personal experiences with community work. Even from across the country, she felt proud to see the seeds she once planted flourish into something meaningful. Time marched on, and eventually the Farnsworth Ramirez Foundation reached a milestone, a new community center in South Los Angeles dedicated to supporting low-income families. It was reminiscent of the early days when Maria worked in Queens, except on a grander scale. The official opening ceremony was a big event, garnering media buzz and drawing attention from wealthy donors, activists, and the local community. Maria invited Victor to attend, thinking it would be meaningful for Matteo and Luna. To her slight surprise, he accepted, flying into La with only a small entourage. Standing at the podium in front of an enthusiastic crowd, Maria spoke about second chances and the power of turning pain into purpose. She unveiled a plaque at the entrance naming the center the Anita Ramirez Community Hub, honoring her mother's unwavering support. After the ribbon cutting, cameras flashed, capturing a moment where Maria, with the twins, posed alongside Victor. In that moment, they appeared almost like a functional co-parenting unit, overshadowing the tumultuous past. The next day, newspapers ran headlines, "From Scandal to Service, the Carters' Legacy of Philanthropy." The narrative had finally shifted from betrayal to redemption. Shortly afterward, Maria received an unexpected parcel at her new office. It was from Victor, and inside she found official documents, ownership transfer papers. Confused, she skimmed the contents. It turned out that Victor was formally transferring an additional 5% stake of Carter's Hope, along with partial stock options in Carter and Company tied specifically to philanthropic ventures. Essentially, he was amplifying her share of the organization they once co-created. A handwritten note accompanied the paperwork. "Maria, I've come to realize that Carter's Hope wouldn't exist in its current form without you. You deserve more than just a percentage on paper. You deserve recognition for the ideas and the heart you brought into this. I can never fully atone for what I did, but I hope this is a step in the right direction, Victor." Maria was stunned. She held the note in trembling hands, tears welling in her eyes. For so long she'd imagined that the best she could hope for was a tenuous truce, co-parenting for the sake of the twins, and a sliver of ownership in the philanthropic arm. This gesture went beyond that, an olive branch, an acknowledgement of her worth. While it didn't erase the past, it offered a chance at genuine partnership in the cause they once dreamed of together. After everything, it felt almost surreal. As she signed the documents, tears of relief and gratitude rolled down her cheeks. This was not just about money or power. It was about validating her contributions, her motherly sacrifices, and the countless nights she'd laid awake wondering if her life was over before it began. Now, with official ownership papers in hand, Maria felt the circle had finally closed. Thank you for sharing in this extraordinary journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. Maria's story reminds us all that it's not where you start, it's where you decide to go, and how resiliently you fight for what you believe in. From being cast aside while pregnant to returning stronger than ever, with twins in tow, Maria emerged as a formidable voice in philanthropy, demanding recognition and respect. In the end, even a powerful millionaire like Victor Carter had to bow to the strength of a mother's devotion and the undeniable force of truth. If you found inspiration or hope in this tale, please show your support, like this video, share it with friends who might need motivation, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama stories that empower and uplift. Your engagement fuels us to bring you more stories of resilience, courage, and triumph against all odds.